All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Space Coast Real Estate Spotlight. Today, we are in for a treat. We have my friend Rachel DeCamp, who is going to tell us everything about her and her amazing property management background and everything else she can help you with. Stay tuned. Hey, Rachel, thanks so much for taking the time today to chat with us about your business, Rocket Association Management. And I'm really interested to learn more about how you got into this business. How long have you been in this business? Tell us a little bit more about you and your business.
Absolutely. Hey, Nate, I'm so excited to be here. I'm really excited to kind of share with you what's going on in the market, about me personally, where I'm at in my field. And I really love my job. And I've actually been doing this for a long time. I think I'm going on my 22nd year in the real estate industry itself. And I started out many, many moons ago, and I got an opportunity to work as a office manager for a company that started out on Beachside, which a lot of people may not know the backstory, but it's pretty cool. It used to be Remax Surfside, who the owner broker over there was Barbara Zapataki, who I know very well, and we're still friends. She actually gave me the opportunity to work in her office setting. It worked out really well. I really was interested in the real estate field at that point. And, unfortunately, in like 2003, the market crashed. And Barbara sat down with me and she said, Rachel, we've got to do something. I want you to get into property management. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But I started really doing it and planning for success. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to open up the gates, hit the ground running, and sponge all kinds of information as much as possible, because being in a field like this, you want to know what you're talking about. You want to be confident in your business. And I see confidence. I really want to learn more. And I've just learned so much. So at that time, we started doing property management. I engaged in all kinds of law. I found Harry Heist, which he's amazing. If a lot of people don't know and you're in the management field, or at least getting a lease from him, Harry Heist is one of the largest attorneys in Orlando, and he represents landlords and property managers only. And he gives the essentials, he gives education, and I just kind of hooked on to him, and he really gave us a lot of information, classes, continuing education. And as of, being a property manager, you have to have your real estate license. So a lot of people don't know that you have to have your real estate license, but I believe you just don't need your real estate license. I think it has to come with a lot of, background, experience. The experience, I mean, I've gone through an epidemic, and that was crazy. I've heard all kinds of stories. I've helped tenants through very hard situations, and I really love what I do. So when I left Remax, Surfside Remax, I've worked for a couple other big companies, and I just ended up working for RLL Real Estate Group, who the owner broker over there is Ryan McDuffie, who's a very good friend of mine. We've been wanting to work together for a really long time. The time was right now, and I have a very independent contract with him, and I have my portfolio, and I am an independent property manager with RLL. I also ended up getting my CAM license, which is a licensed community association management. It's just basically management on a bigger spectrum. And so being multi-licensed is very important to me. And as of today, I do management and still do sales through RLL Real Estate Group. And Rocket Association Management right here is my baby. I birthed that about the beginning of this year, and now I manage 5 associations. So I like to expand my knowledge. Being multi-licensed is very important to me, and that's where I am today.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you had gotten into property management initially, maybe not, something that you ran toward, but you were introduced to it and you found that you just really loved it. And over the last 20 years, it sounds like you've done quite a lot, which is really cool. Tell us,
Yeah.
how did you get into real estate in general? What were you doing before real estate?
Yeah, so that's a funny story. I used to be a dental hygienist assistant and a dental assistant. So I was doing that for a little while, thought I wanted to go in the nursing industry, and just got an opportunity to work as a, receptionist in the real estate field, and it just piqued my interest, and it accidentally became a strength. And so leaving the dental industry and going into something like this, it's been great. I mean, the difference is being with a patient one-on-one, dealing with them, letting them know that we're there to help them, taking care of their needs. I think that one-on-one opportunity in a patient type situation helped me really give owners a good experience. I talk a lot. We talk about how we're going to solve problems. Tenants come to me and they've got things going on in their lives. Rent intake is not the only thing that we do in a professional management situation. But that's basically, how it came to be, the strength of having that problem solver. Now, also, before I got into this business, I was a cashier at Publix. So I was also in the industry to help people. The service industry has really helped me out a lot. And here's where I ended up doing this. Now, my first initial experience in the real estate industry wasn't that good. Nate, I have to be very, very honest with you. I actually bought my first home very, very young. And at that point, I didn't have any persons with the amount of knowledge to help me through the process. And unfortunately, it was a pretty bad situation. And I'm going to be honest with you, I went through the lending process, and a lender took advantage, basically got me approved for something that was out of my income. Made up some, documents that gave me extra income that wasn't true. And learning from that experience, because I had to lose that home several years later and short sale it, I went through that process and I was very upset. And at that point, I really pushed forward because I cared about my situation and kind of wanted to prevent that from other people going through that and taken advantage of. And that's not what I want to do. So, now in the real estate field, I kind of close maybe 1 or 2 transactions on the real estate sales side a month. And then I do full-time management. And I just like to take my time. I think it's quality over quantity. I think a lot of people can realize that the basics and the fortunate events that you go through that make you learn on what to do onto other people later on in life.
Yeah, it's really important. I'm glad that you highlighted that. I'm sorry that happened to you, Rachel. Obviously, that's not
Yeah,
fun, but it really opened your eyes to what can happen when you work with the wrong people.
absolutely.
So that's why it's so important for anybody that's listening that is a homeowner or hopes to be a homeowner to make sure that you're connecting with people that have a great reputation. You can deal with anybody that has a license. The license doesn't teach you how to do the job. The license means that you went through a course and you passed a test. But
Exactly.
working with the right people is going to be a game changer for you. And you can avoid situations like Rachel just described. I was in the business back then, and I know that there were a lot of people that were doing a lot of things that prevented all of us for years for being able to do, what we love to do, and that is real estate and mortgage. It was a tough gig for a lot of us for years because there were so many regulations that they were working through. And now that we've gotten through that and the dust of that has settled a little bit, we're in a completely different situation. There's so many safeguards, so many regulations, so many guidelines and laws in place to prevent things like that from happening. But it was real. And I know that a lot of people went through a similar situation to what you're describing. And it's really unfortunate. But thank God we're at a position now in our industry and in the country where we've got a much tighter grip on those sort of things.
We are. And I really have created really good relationships with a lot of the agents in the community. And we feed information off of each other, how to how to go through complicated situations, how to really tackle situations that a lot of us have never been in. And one of those items that I'm dealing with a lot is agents are calling and asking how to deal with tenant related issues when it comes to a home that they're selling. And in one situation, I was able to say, okay, an agent called me, was selling a home, had a tenant, didn't know how to give proper notice because, per our contracts, we have to give vacant properties. And that's the expectations of the lenders and the new buyers. owners.
Mhm.
And so in one situation, no one looked at the former lease. And a lot of people can't wrap their head around this, but unfortunately, there are things in a lease, even if it's expired, that actually transfer to the relationship that still exists when a tenant is still in place. Just because a contract is expired and you still
Mhm.
have a tenant living in that home, there are notice requirements. And so what I do is I say, okay, agent, go ahead and send me that lease, let me look at it. And in one situation, there was a lease that had a 365-day notice. So unfortunately, that agent went through the process, meeting with her new seller, getting her contract signed, having the expectations that they could sell that home. But unfortunately, that tenant had possession of that home. And
Mm.
so many things like this can actually impact our everyday real estate life. And so I really want to still be that source for these agents to come and ask these hard questions, because you have a lot of properties that are occupied with tenants and they could affect the overall sale of a property.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, I didn't know that. So that's definitely something new to me as well, that there's a lot of underlying things in contracts and what needs to stay. So one of the things that you touched on a few moments ago was just the fact that having a strength of understanding certain things and knowledge of certain things kind of helps set you apart. Can you unpack that a little bit more? What would you say are the strengths that really set you apart from others that are in a similar space?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things going on in, let's say, statutory law and compliances when it comes to tenants' rights and owners' rights. And like I said, I love to learn more. And so I'll give you two instances that kind of let me stick out as far as, experience and what owners need to do when they are interviewing their agents. Interview several agents, look at their ability, request their lease, request their internal charges and things that they have the tenant accomplish to get into the homes, because some of them can be wasteful, some of them can be a little bit more overbearing, and we want it to be a nice experience. So let's talk about the epidemic. That was one big thing that all of us went through, and we get a lot of information from social media and the news outlets, but let's face it, those can be inaccurate.
Mhm.
So there had been a misconception that everyone can stop paying rent, which is not true. And unfortunately, if you read the documents that came out and the statute that supported tenants, it only had to do with government funds. So any homes that were attached to government homes, VA loans, Section 8, anything to do with government backed loans, those were the ones that were only protected. And even with that said, it's, if you read the statute that came out to protect people during this epidemic, it said that they had to at least pay something.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, what I did is I got ahead of it. I spoke to my attorney, who is on my side, by my side, and represents my owners when they come into my company. And that's a big benefit. You need to look for a company that has that legal liaison. We are not attorneys, and that is a misconception, that property managers know everything, and we don't. Our experiences give us some knowledge, but I still have to ask my attorney every once in a while. This is a new situation for me. So, I had an almost non-existent deficit when it came to tenants and a delinquency list, which was really good. And if some of these tenants were going through an unimaginable issue, I spoke to them. I let them vent. I helped them. I was in their home. We filled out applications together for government assistance. And I emailed all my tenants, hey, if you're having a problem, get ahead of it. This is the number, apply for assistance. I will help you, but you can't run away from it, because either way, read the statute carefully, because it has certain obligations for tenants. And a lot of people just took media and ran with it and just thought, hey, we're just going to sit in our homes. And eventually what happened was the bad part of it. And they were dismissed out of their home some way, how. But in this instance, I really want to get ahead of things like that. So that was one. And right now, I'm fighting a good fight, because our governor, DeSantis, just signed a new law, basically saying that we are able to offer a fee schedule for a security deposit and not a lump sum when tenants move into homes. Well, the funny thing is that the owners reserve the right to accept something like that. And a fee is very dangerous. When
Mm.
tenants move into homes, they have to have something tangible. Just like if you were to go and purchase a home, you have to put down an escrow deposit.
Mhm.
That is, we're taking that offer, you're going under contract, we expect you to follow that contract. But with a security deposit, it puts the mindset to renters that they have something to work towards. So this bill, this law that was passed wasn't thought about, and there were no professionals like myself or anyone, even a legal, person to kind of sit down and say, listen, you're trying to fight a fight, but it's really not going to help in any areas. And I think people need more assistance, and owners need more incentives, tax incentives. The market is taking a little decline in my opinion. I've had to reduce rentals a couple $100 a month to get them rented. We have a lot of construction in Brevard County, so there's lots of things affecting it. So with me looking at those market traits, following the law, having the answers for the law, that just gives me the step ahead. Knowledge is powerful. Knowledge is absolutely powerful. All the professionals here in Brevard County, the ones that I deal with, like yourself, we're very, very smart. That's why I love to do things like this with you, Nate. So that is kind of my perception of why I'm different than other managers in our area.
Yeah. So you touched on something there that I want to unpack a little bit more. I'm kind of curious about. When we look at just real estate in general, sales prices, as we get the reports monthly from the Space Coast, Association of Realtors, we're
Mhm.
seeing that the sales prices are continuing to increase. You're saying that you're seeing declines in rentals. Is that maybe a little bit of an offshoot of what we saw in real estate sales over the last couple of years, where there were a lot of buyers in the market and there were overbidding? So a lot of these folks maybe thought that they could rent for more than the actual market dictated. Is that what we're seeing there, or?
Yeah. The market is funny right now. When a person calls me and they want like a comparable rate, we usually do it on the comparability of the area. Well, now we're having to expand a little bit more. And I'm being honest with people, like, you used to be able to get a nice 3 bedroom, 2 bed, 3-2 single family home anywhere in the central Brevard area. Average price was maybe $2,500. In the bigger market sector, it was around 25, 20, 2,600. I'm having to reduce some of those. Specifically, we can talk about the Palm Bay area, which is a great area to live. Palm Bay is beautiful. It's upcoming. There's a lot of land that hasn't been constructed. But in the past 2 years, as our market has grown, they've been able to produce a lot of construction. And so last week, when I'm looking for a property for a tenant, I come to 18 homes, single family new construction homes. And you can see where they started out at like 2,500 and they're down to 22. And I have to have real honest conversations with my owners, because a lot of construction can fluctuate and affect the market. And so I just had an owner call me, needs management in the Palm Bay area. Basic 3 bedroom, 2 bath. They're going to list it for 2,100, just below market value, because again, these homes have been sitting on the market for more than 90 days. And that's not the typical trait that you see for rentals right now.
Right. Yeah, that's a great call out. Something that I didn't really put into perspective until you said that, but I
Yeah.
can appreciate that. There's probably a lot of rentals, Palm Bay specifically, because I live in Palm Bay and there's a lot of growth, where there's a lot of new construction going up, and not all of them are going to be owner occupied. So I can see
Nope.
how rental
Yep.
numbers might move around like that. That's interesting.
Absolutely. You're welcome. You're
So
welcome.
if I'm somebody that has a property that I want to rent out, let's say I live in the house now and we're upgrading. Our family's growing.
Hmm.
Not my family, but in the example,
Yes.
we're going to
Yeah.
upgrade. We're going to get a larger house. We're going to move to a different part of the area. What's your advice for somebody in that position, in terms of reaching out to a property manager? What as a neophyte to all of this, I've never done this before. What does a property manager help me with versus me just talking to Bob down the road, or even putting an ad on Facebook? I know that those
Yeah.
outcomes aren't as good. So
Perfect.
help me
Yeah. Yeah.
understand what the advantages are.
Okay. So, I believe there's a misconception in the management industry that we just intake rent. But as a good manager, you have to enforce and help represent your owner because in the state of Florida, renters have more rights. I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of people realize that. That's a reason why my lease is 35 pages long. And so basically, when you're giving someone possession of your property, you're giving them legal possession, there has to be a contract to protect you because, when they have unauthorized pets or unauthorized occupants, you need to make sure who's in that home because it presents a legal situation whenever you want to give notice or if you have to do an eviction. If you don't have a property manager, those costs, you're going to have to supplement those. Those are going to be your costs that you're going to have to, take in. With my property management services, because I have a legal liaison, my attorney charges minuscule when it comes to evictions. I've never lost an eviction in over 20 years. And that's really important to me. I don't want to always go to the eviction route, but when someone doesn't pay their rent, you have to have a conversation with them. And if they're not going to take responsibility, ultimately the next step is an eviction.
Sure.
Well, you have to, under normal circumstances, if you're managing your home, on your own, you're probably going to have to get an attorney. You're going to have to pay a retainer, which is very expensive. And my, eviction costs are just a few $100s. And normally that comes out of the tenant security deposit. There are ways to supplement so the owners don't have money out of their pocket. Another thing that we do is we do inspections. Inspections are really important because the law says in Florida, if you do not enforce your side of the lease, if you don't do inspections on a quarterly basis, you're assuming a lot more than wear and tear on your home. So, for example, if you move in someone, they're well qualified, and they end up being a hoarder, what they say is that a lot of times, if you don't step foot in that property a year later, you're assuming a lot of that wear and tear because you never took the responsibility to enforce your side of the lease. And so if you're an owner that doesn't care and you're non-existent or you can't be here, you really need to think about the liability issue, the cost, the overall cost. What we see with professional management, it creates a less gap for the tenant to have non-understanding of their position. They are explained the lease obligations. They have a strict guideline and an installment agreement. A lot of people don't know it's an installment agreement. It's a very important binding lease. So it's just like a car note, it's just like a credit card. These installment agreements are an agreement to pay back. So what do? How do you qualify your tenants? Well, we normally go through a pretty in-depth process to make sure that they can afford it. We have affordability, normal and customary tracks where we make sure they make at least 2.5 to 3 times the rent. We look and see if they owe apartment complexes or other owners any, damages or money left behind from not, completing another obligation. So that can play a factor. I try not to deny, any applicant. I try to approve applicants based on their performance because I know credit isn't everything. And I actually know a lot of the fair credit laws, and there are a lot of things that you can't deny for. I stress a lot of this that owners and agents need to learn what disparative impact is. And it's the way that you're supposed to treat background screenings and how you approve, because it can be a liability issue for most. When you run background screenings, there are companies that have to come to you and make sure that you're qualified to do
Mhm.
screenings. And so I've created a screening process for agents that may not have those essentials. So I work with agents in Brevard County that may need really good screening. They'll call me. I'll say, hey, let me do your screening for you. Obviously, they're doing that for their owner, which you
Mhm.
want to make sure who's in your home. So through the process from start to finish, I make sure that that tenant follows those guidelines. And upon my inspections, if there's something going on, maybe pre-hurricane planning, which we're in hurricane season right now, I do own a handyman business with my husband on the side. So sometimes we help our owners and we look at soffit related issues, roofing related issues, and I'm reporting to them what is going on with their home in real time so they can get ahead of the maintenance. There's a lot of other things. And I mean, Nate, we can go through stories of different
For
things
sure.
that tenants can do, even the most qualified tenants. Sometimes there's a sense of entitlement where they're going to move in their boyfriend, their girlfriend, and lion, tigers, and bears. And oh my, it gets pretty complicated, but I'm kind of the one that can have those tough conversations. At the end of the day, an owner is always going to be emotionally attached to their home in some kind of way. So unfortunately, some of these owners may be doing things that eventually will take advantage and put them in a very vulnerable situation or position to lose money, to lose their tenant, and, kind of be defeated as a landlord. I actually really love my job. I like my tenants a lot. I want them to understand that we've been giving them an opportunity to rent a home. So their obligation is to follow the lease through its entirety and then have a successful outcome. So maybe later on down the road, as I'm hearing, most of you lenders are looking for background and payment history for,
Yeah.
for people. And I would love to help them get into the buying process. I love it when tenants call me when they want to cancel their lease, when they say, I'm buying a home. Perfect. I'm so excited for you. Let's talk about the lease. Let's talk about how we can professionally bring it to close so then you can buy your first home. I'm so excited for you. It's wonderful to be a homeowner. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what we do. We make sure that the contract is taken care of, and management is property management. It's not tenant management. It's not owner management. It's everything underneath that property. So I want to give my owners a really good experience.
Yeah. So it sounds to me it's a very intricate, very not complicated, but there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of things going on. As somebody that doesn't do that professionally, I'm putting myself at a huge disadvantage to try to be my own property manager versus turning it over to somebody that knows what they're doing, that's going to be able to protect my rights and be able to advocate for me when these things come up. I love that. So you mentioned,
Exactly.
sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. No, one of the things that is resonating in my mind are things that owners don't know how to solve. Those are the problems. So, things that owners need to think about. And I usually do this in my pitch to owners because some of them call and they're like, I just need you to find me a tenant. I don't need any property management. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about this. So, I give them the scenarios. I said, what if your tenant passes on? We went through an epidemic, Nate, and I dealt with 2 tenants that passed away in my homes. It almost defeated me. It was a really, really sad situation. When you're dealing with that, that affects the legality of the lease. Do you know what you have to do when a tenant, passes on in your home? You have to lock that home for 90 days and treat it as a storage unit. And so no one can really tell me that I'm not strong at my job when I'm dealing with an owner. I'm sorry, the mother of a tenant who basically is having such a hard time not getting into the home after her son died in the home. And I'm the one on the phone saying, I can't do anything right now because of the legality. So, there are a lot of things that affect this overall. And I just want people to know bankruptcies, deaths, divorces, people move on and they break up all the time, but they forget that the security deposit is attached to both parties. So,
Mhm.
do you have the documents to cure it? Do you have the situation? Do you have the legality to cure this? A lot of people don't know where to even begin. I want to be that resource for these owners. And my fee is minuscule to what could happen overall on the lengthy and just very expensive battle if they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's so many reasons to get a Rachel involved versus trying to do it on your own, for sure. So you mentioned a few minutes ago that it excites you when you have a tenant that is reaching out saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy a property." I love
Yes.
that too, obviously being a mortgage broker. But what I want to know is if I am a tenant and I have the option to buy my lease property, what does that look like? How does that process go?
Well, I want to say a few years back, Nate, and correct me if I'm wrong. I remember that the lenders really did have some issues about tenants buying the homes that they live in. And I think now it's a little bit more acceptable. So the tenants have been living there. They know what maintenance has been done. They know the brick and mortar. They know the bones of the home. I really don't think that's a problem, but there's one step that I know is missed a lot. And when I deal with these, because I've dealt with several, the title companies really appreciate the guidance because when you're dealing with a security deposit, that's money that's been put on the tenant position that prevailed at that point. But when you sell the home, what happens to that escrow account? You want really good documentation. So in a sale contract, my biggest advice is to make sure that the escrow is put on the HUD in some way or some fashion to designate that that's going back to the tenant, so everyone knows that that is what that was intended to. That should be the tenant's money. They're purchasing the house. There's, the security deposit is for damages. So if a sale prevails, that money automatically goes back to the tenant. An owner can't keep that or anything like that. So we just have to come to an agreement to make sure that it's documented some way. So, for future reference, that money went back to that tenant.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. I've got 2 questions, and then we will be able to tie a little bow on this. So my first question to you, Rachel, is what do you see happening over the course of the next 5 years? Do you see people moving toward or away from renting versus owning?
Our economic industry here in Brevard is so strong. Our aerospace industry has driven us. And I have to admit, it's a pretty expensive market out there. But you know what? Homeownership is a prideful thing. I know a lot of people want to purchase their home, and some people are just happy being in a rental. I really think it's going to depend on the expenses, how much an owner wants to spend. People are being, I believe, a little bit more careful with their expenses. They're living within their means. And I think the mortgage industry is helping. There's not really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, I really see a lot of healthy loans. I think we experienced a lot of unhealthiness in our industry years ago. And I really think that now is the time that we have good lenders in our area doing the right thing. Properties are, they're put together very well when it comes to the lending package. They understand their responsibilities, and I think the banks are really helping. I think they're getting involved in case an owner or someone gets in a financial situation, and owners can rent their home and get some income right now, because I believe homes still have an investment value. So I think it really depends on what our market is doing right now. And it's going to depend on what people really want to expense their money on. I'm happy in my rental, and maybe I'll buy one day, but I've owned homes, but right now in my life, it's what's best for me. And I think people are making better decisions. As long as people make better decisions, it's going to be best for them.
Yeah. Well put. Well put. Okay. So I ask everybody that comes on to our show, what is the one thing, you have to narrow it down to one thing, that you love about working or living on the Space Coast?
Well, I love the weather here. I know it gets hot sometimes, but in my downtime, I do a lot of traveling. I like to enjoy the weather. I like to go to the beach. Brevard County has so much to offer. I mean, I've lived here since I was 8 years old, and I just really love my community. I like growth. I like commercial growth. I think that our aerospace industry has just grown so much. I love every afternoon that SpaceX or Elon decides to just shoot a rocket in the air. And it's so funny because we never know when they're going to happen, but they're regularly happening in the backyard, and it's still stunning to this day. So I really like to look outside and see those rocket launches. I really like the aerospace industry. I think it's great for our market. It's bringing so many great people here to Brevard, and it's just growing. Small businesses are growing, and I just like to see our county and our area doing so well. When you live here, you play here, and you just want everything to grow. Growth is great. And I really enjoy just everything about my community.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we love it here too. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, anybody that's watching, anybody that's listening, to learn a little bit more about Rocket Association Management or RLL, or just anything that you can do to help them, where can they find you online?
Sure. Well, I just got 2 websites done. I'm so excited. The first is BrevardCountyPropertyManagement.com, and that's a website dedicated to RLL and the basic management and sales that I do. And then I have RocketAssociationManagement.com, and that is my Rocket Association Management company that manages associations, condos, HOAs, and that you can email me. My email is rocketbrevard@gmail.com. My number is right back here, and that is 321-403-6985. 888-878-7155. And I'd be happy to help anybody that has any complicated situations or looking for any management services. I really appreciate anyone giving me the opportunity, and the agents, the overwhelming amount of agents that have been referring properties and owners to me for, oh my God, how many years. I really appreciate that. And I guess they like, know, and trust me. And I really am humble for the opportunity of those referrals. So thank you. Thank you to all the agents in Brevard County.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Rachel, for coming on. I know that I learned a lot. I'm sure that our listeners and viewers have learned a lot as well. And I can't wait until the next time that we're able to catch up and talk a little bit more about what's going on in Brevard County and the Space Coast, and especially in property management. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Nate. You take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.